In the tutorial video to come, you will see an overview of how AssetAccountant works with Sage Intacct, specifically for use in South Africa and as it relates to fixed asset depreciation. We will start by creating a new draft asset in Sage Intacct. Then we'll show you step by step how it is pulled into AssetAccountant and show you the many features that are available within AssetAccountant to precisely account for depreciation.
So the first thing we'll do is to create a draft asset in Intacct. So I will create a journal for this purpose. So let's just say I'm going to buy a new mobile phone in here. I will post this to the clearing account, the draft asset clearing account. And let's say this is going to cost 25,000 Rand. And then I will post the other side of that to accounts payable. So once that's submitted within Intacct, I can then move over to AssetAccountant. Here I can go into the Add Assets section, and that will interrogate the clearing account to look for any new assets that have been added. Here you can see my new mobile phone has been added. There are three things you can do to this once it's come through. If it's come through in error, you can ignore it. You'll have to remove it from the clearing account in Intacct. If it's an additional cost for an existing asset, then you can add a cost to the existing asset. If it's a new asset, then you can just add the asset here. So I'm going to say this is my new mobile phone. It's come through in there. I can add a department or a location if I need to, if those have not been done in Intacct. And then up here, I can set the depreciation treatment. You'll see here the default for tax for mobile phones is 50/30/20, which is one of the SARS methods, but you can edit that on an asset by asset basis if you need to. So let's say we're going to do 40, then 20/20 for tax. And then I can also modify the accounts depreciation if I want to. So let's say I'm happy here with the 3-year straight line for that. I can save that. That will now disappear from the Sage Intacct draft asset screen. And then it'll now be showing up in the asset screen that you can see here. This screen here is the view that you will likely do most of your work in AssetAccountant from. You can see it's got the asset register, it's got the asset groups down the left-hand side, and then the movement in the period you're looking at across the top. There, you can toggle between the tax view and the accounts view if you want. This will show the numbers calculated with the tax methods, and you can also choose the period you'd like to look at. So we have monthly options. You can look quarterly, year to date, or you can look at your financial year if you would like as well. All of these columns can be open, so you can see here the cost and accumulated depreciation that makes up the value. And you can also open up the individual asset groups here. So if we look at the mobile phones, here you can see my new mobile phone has been added there for 25,000 Rand. Every asset has its own screen that you can go into, and you can see here there is a schedule that shows the depreciation over the life of the asset. You can scroll all the way down to the bottom. So that means when you create a journal, it's just picking up the relevant number for the month and posting it in the journal. There's also a tab for tax here, so you can see the annual calculations of the tax depreciation on my mobile phone. The details tab here shows you the classifications or the dimensions that you have set up. You can add them from here and transfer them if you need to. So let's just put an asset in there. You can also allocate them. So if you're sharing an asset across locations or departments, you can do those. The system also lets you add custom fields. If you want to store things like serial numbers or VIN numbers, those can be done in there. And you can also upload attachments to store invoices or photographs of assets if you'd like to in this section as well. There are a number of actions that you can take at the asset level. Over here in the Actions menu button, these are also available in bulk actions as well, which I'll come back to. So if you're managing large volumes of assets, you can do that through imports and spreadsheets rather than having to do these one at a time. But I'll just run through these one at a time so that you can see the power of the system. Just running down this menu here, you can add an opening balance to an asset. So this means if you're bringing an asset in partway through its life, you will set the depreciation at the date you want AssetAccountant to start depreciating. This means if you're changing systems, then we will just bring in the closing balance for those assets from the prior system and then start depreciating that from there, which means that you don't need to do any reconciliations or recreate the exact calculations in AssetAccountant or any adjusting journals. We will just make that a smooth process as possible. You can have components in the system, so we support parent-child relationships between assets. And you can also add a quantity as well. So if you have, for example, 100 shares in the system, you can put that you just have 100 there, and then that enables partial sales and partial write-offs, where AssetAccountant does the profit or loss on disposal and prorates that as needed as well. Leases are covered in a separate video. So I'll move to these two menu items here, which are transfer group or additional cost. Generally, these two are used together for assets which are work in progress or assets under construction. If you have an asset that you have in construction, when you're ready to put it into its life, then you would transfer that from the work in progress group into the correct group and start depreciating it at the same time. And additional cost is if you're paying for an asset in installments. For example, you can do that. Or if you have started to depreciate an asset and you would like to add a maintenance cost that you want to capitalize, then you can do that through the additional cost option. And then here is where you also sell or write off assets. So if you sold an asset, you can just put the date you sold it in the proceeds, and then AssetAccountant will do all the journals from there for you. As I say, all of these things can be done in bulk as well. So if you're managing volumes of assets, then it's easier to do them in bulk rather than individually. There are also some actions that you can take specifically for accounts or for tax. In the accounts actions here, you can do things like reassess. So if you'd like to change the method or the life for the asset, then you can do that, and you can choose when you'd like to do that as well. You can revalue, so we support revaluation reserves. That will be tracked on the asset level, will also go into journals. You can impair assets as well. And then we also have the option to adjust either the cost or the accumulated depreciation. There are reasons that we find users tend to wish to adjust the asset from time to time. And then you can also add a make good provision for scenarios where you've got leasehold improvements or right of use assets tend to be the main users of those. And then similarly for tax, you can also do a reassessment or an adjustment within the tax depreciation setting there as well. There are a number of reports that are available for the depreciation schedule. So you can see here there's acquisitions, disposals, forecast reports we run as well. You can look at the asset summary. So I can just run a report. For each of these reports, you choose if you'd like to see it for tax or accounts purposes. You can put a start date in, and then they are mostly all available in PDF or CSV as well. So you can just choose the format. Once you've done that, the system will run the report, and when that's been downloaded into the browser, you can just open that up, and here you can see what one of the PDF reports looks like. So you can put your logo. It has nice headers and footers and totals and so on in there. You can also create your own reports from this asset screen. So if you wanted a bespoke report, then you would just choose from the list of columns that we have here available to create the report that you'd like to see. And you can also filter your assets. So if you wanted to say, show me all of my computers in a certain location, for example, then you could do that from here. So these are all the computers I've got available in Hoodsprit. The next thing I'll show you is journals. Just before we go into journals, we'll just have a look at the asset group. In the asset group screen here, this is where you set up the default methods for each of the groups. So you can set that for tax or accounts. And then down here are the mappings into Intacct. So this register is connected to an instance of Intacct, and so it's pulled through the general ledger, and I can just set up these mappings. So you can see a computer, the cost account is 15,660. So when I go into journals, I will let me create my November journal in there. So that will create the depreciation journals. It will do all the cost and additions and disposals or whatever else you've run in that month. And you can see in the computer equipment here that the depreciation expense is charged to 60630, accumulated depreciation 15665, which were the numbers that we saw on the computer equipment asset group screen. And then once you're happy with that, there's a button up here to post the journal directly into Sage Intacct. The final thing I'll just cover is in register settings. There are a number of items that you can set up in here. So financial years, you can choose your financial year. We also support non-standard periods. There is an ability to set DIY methods. So if you have non-standard depreciation methods, you can create these yourselves. There are 3 levels of user that we support. So a register guest is read-only. A register user can just manage the assets in the system, and a register manager can manage all of the settings and change users as well within each register. Classifications, this is where we synchronize with the dimensions in Intacct. You can set up other classifications in AssetAccountant relevant for assets as well. So it's not a one-to-one relationship between dimensions and classifications. And then integrations is just where you set up the initial configuration with Intacct. So in this video, we've looked at how AssetAccountant works seamlessly with Sage Intacct in South Africa using a draft asset account that we specifically set up in Intacct to pull assets into AssetAccountant. Then we do the management of the assets here and then post journals back to Sage Intacct.